as you know, the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, catastrophe, fiasco, debacle, all of the above, isn't going anywhere. And one of the reasons for that is because Donald can't seem to shut up about it. Every move he makes in order to change the subject just brings us right back to the subject he wants us to avoid. Now, this is one of those instances that occurs from time to time in which we're given a chance to grapple with how we got here by looking back. Something like this is allowed to happen because of our failures as a country to reckon with one of this country's original sin. And in this case, it's the sin of misogyny. Misogyny is so woven into the fabric of our institutions, our culture, our way of life, that it's barely even recognized anymore. The only reason somebody like Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to get away with what he got away with for so long is because he had a lot of help. And he would not have had that help if women were valued in our society. Now, again, I don't have any particular insights into why so many men in particular were willing to overlook or actively assist Jeffrey Epstein. But I imagine part of the reason is because they don't value women at all, and perhaps even worse, they wish they were able to get away with what Epstein got away with. So I've been thinking about this in the context of the misogyny in my family. Every single person, with the exception of my dad, I think, was a misogynist, including the women, especially my grandmother and my Aunt Marianne. Now, my dad and his siblings, for the most part, grew up in the 40s and 50s, the time in which there was sexism in every aspect of people's lives. My grandfather ran an extremely successful real estate business. And despite the fact that my Aunt Marianne was the oldest child, it was never, ever a thought that she could possibly be the person to take over and run the company. That would be the oldest son, his namesake, Fred Trump Jr., my dad. For various reasons, that didn't work out. And then the next oldest son, Donald, was picked to be the heir to the empire. But was he the best person for the job? To be perfectly honest with you, given the fact that my grandfather was a sociopath and the kind of person he was, I'm not entirely sure my dad was the best person for the job, but he certainly would have been better than Donald. Marianne, as it turns out, though, would have been an excellent choice. She had Donald's ruthlessness and willingness to do whatever it takes, but she also had the right kind of temperament, which my dad definitely didn't have. My dad was sensitive and not exactly a shark or a killer, which is what my grandfather needed. So Marianne would have been a perfectly good fit, and I think she lived her life hurt that she was never under consideration, but at the same time, another part of her understood that as a woman, she had no right. She could not possibly be good enough. And she and I had many conversations in which she made it clear her contempt for women as a species. I've lost count of how many times she referred to other women as bitches, a word I never use, but she used frequently. Women, in her view, were underhanded, catty, disloyal, unintelligent, unfit. Women should not have power, which is interesting considering she herself was a federal judge with a lot of power. So I think that we can extrapolate from my experience with misogyny in my family to what's going on now and what continues to go on in this country. Because it's bad enough that men are still pretty much in control of everything, and with the fascist Republican Party in charge, it's basically white men, and it's extraordinarily wealthy white men who are in charge of everything right now. But there are plenty of women who are giving an assist to the project ongoing, which so many of us have lost sight of because the news cycle continues to be insane, that one of the agendas of the Trump regime is to strip rights from women across the board. The other reason we really need to start thinking about the ways in which misogyny is operative in our culture and our country is because we continually lose sight of what's really going on here. Yes, Epstein's crimes were horrific and unspeakable. The extent to which he was allowed to get away with them for so long. Also horrific and unspeakable. But there are actual victims still out there. And that gets completely forgotten. Imagine what they're going through when they have to continue to live with the fact that they never got accountability because the monster who perpetrated horrific crimes against them took the easier way out by committing suicide. Imagine how awful it is for them to see on a daily basis that the most powerful people in this country are dedicated to covering up for Jeffrey Epstein and his potential co-conspirators, and that the person behind that effort, more than anybody else, just happens to be President of the United States. I would say that this opens old wounds, except that's inaccurate. The wounds these women suffered, the grievous wounds these women suffered, have never healed, have never been allowed to heal. And it also makes me think about the over 23 women who credibly accused Donald Trump of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and worse. What must they feel knowing that the man who treated them so horrifically was rewarded with a second shot at the presidency? We know that Donald is an adjudicated rapist. He was found to have raped E. Jean Carroll by a jury of his peers. What must it be like for her and those who care about such things to know that a man who was accused and found to have committed that crime, civilly, of course, because of the statute of limitations, to be put in a position of power to continue to harm women even more and to a greater degree. All of this, I would argue, is again because we as a people never ever do the hard work of looking at ourselves in the mirror and learning from our past mistakes, because you cannot learn from your past mistakes if you never acknowledge that they were made. And that, quite frankly, is one of the many reasons we end up with people like Donald Trump in power. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.